So can you expand on those? On what would be then a proper diet? What would be an improper diet? What are things a lot of people are consuming that would be best for them to then, let go? And
the simple answer would be as whole food as possible, as unprocessed as possible, and cook it in your home with as little salt as possible added to it. Maximum half a teaspoon a day actually is what we should get into our body. I'm talking about the ideal now. There might be some exceptions sometimes, but in the end we want to reach for the optimum. And I would say a plant-based diet for sure. I think there's no denying of it that actually the plant-based diet is the best, what we are adapted to eat.
Do you have some more proof to kind of back that up? Because that's a big thing, especially I know to a lot of American listeners, like a lot of meat eaters.
I'm actually glad that you asking me for the proof, because anyone could say anything, a doctor could say anything, and then in the end we actually need to have some evidence. I would say the strongest arguments I would say for a plant-based diet, it is that when you put people on it, it not only prevents heart diseases, like the most, like the deadliest diseases we have now is cardiovascular diseases, exactly, because of the plaque and cholesterol that is built up in our arteries. It doesn't only prevent it, but it actually can treat it. You actually have pictures from people being on a plant-based diet for 3-4 years and looking on their coronary arteries, the arteries that supply the heart, that they actually regressed. There's no other diet that have been put to test that actually can do this. I would say this is the mine at least go to study and argument why a plant-based diet would be the
is it by any chance a China study, or is that something else? I've heard a lot about the China study.
I actually never read the book there. I should
You got
probably
another.
No, I think it was what was his name again, Dr. Oz. I know it's been replicated by Dr. Esselstyn, but also I had this actually in my exam thesis, but I keep forgetting all these names because I don't use them so much anymore, these health gurus, but there are papers on it.
Okay, so the plant-based diet, what was the question that I asked that led me to that? The bad habits.
The bad habits, and food. And it is that we have so many additives that we get addicted to with taste. And I would say, in the end, why do we eat like we eat? In the end, it is because of our sinful nature and pleasure. We always seek this, whenever you feel empty or so. It's with all health aspects of life, that we can get addicted to anything because we try to somehow get this stimulant and pleasure trap and feeling to get something, feel something, some kind of joy. And that is also why I think food can be so addictive. I think food should be very enjoyable. It should be.
Right.
It should taste good. It should be enjoyable, but in its right amounts. That is when we actually are the happiest. It's never nice to be addicted to anything and be dependent upon it.
I used to think with let me tell you. I have been a vegetarian for a big part of my life. When I was 6, I decided to be a vegetarian, only one in my family. My mom was so sweet that she made 2 meals every day. So one vegetarian option for me and then their option. And I was a vegetarian until I met my wife. And my wife was just a meat eater. We went to Australia on a trip together, and my wife has a lot of different allergies. So I thought, okay, for this trip, I'm not going to complicate our diet and our eating options. For this trip, I will eat meat to make it simpler for us to be able to find meals that we can eat. So I did that. And then after this trip, I found that my conviction to eat vegetarian wasn't as strong anymore. So I actually continued to eat meat for a couple of years. And then we got pregnant with our son. And then we started to look more into the health and the diet of like, okay, how do we actually live healthier? And especially now that we're responsible for another human being. Or this was actually before we got pregnant, because we knew that we wanted to start trying. So some couple of months before, we started making these changes and started eating vegan and stuff. But Yeah, actually, I'm just going over my point of why I bring this story up. In Australia, we actually at some point came to this restaurant and it said, like, no gluten, no GMO, no sugar, no this, no that, no that. And I was thinking, what's left? You know, how is this going to be anything good? But I also knew it's very practical for Katja because most likely she would be able to eat there. And we had not been able to go to any restaurants for a long time. So we went inside and there I saw this cheesecake, or the vegan cheesecake, that looked so good. And I was like, how did they make this? And we ordered it and I ate it and it was literally one of the best things that I've ever eaten. And we continued eating meat after that, like I said, but it did plant in me that seed of that vegan can be really tasty. And after we have switched to eating vegan, I gotta say, the best food that I've ever eaten is all vegan. It's all plant-based. But that in itself, now that you bring that up as one of the things that will help with health, is everything that is plant-based healthy? Or can you mess that up too?
You can. You can for sure. That's why I add the word whole food.
Right.
And there's things that are plant-based that are not healthy. Like I don't think marijuana is very
Which one?
Marijuana.
Marijuana?
No, marijuana, you know, like what you smoke, and that is plant-based. I'm sure some people would argue there are many plants that are poisonous and so on, but also like you can process plants and strip them of all their nutrients. You should eat them in its entirety.
Right.
As soon as we start to process things, we start to eat in a way that we were never created to eat. We have the sugar beet, it's plant-based, right? But when you take all the sugar from it and only take that, the same with oils, you know, when you strip them of all the other nutrients and beneficial things. Food was made to be eaten whole. That is also what the evidence points towards, like the more like natural you eat, and the healthier.
Yeah, it's good that you bring that up with. That was what we were made for, because also when you think about Adam and Eve, they weren't made for a plant-based diet.
Yeah. And the truth is, when we actually look on our physiology, it's very obvious. I like to ask dentists these questions, like because of the teeth, they always think like, we're carnivores. Are we like carnivores, omnivores, or herbivores? And the truth is, we actually are herbivores, pretending to be omnivores. The thing is, when you actually put herbivores, like rabbits or rhesus monkeys, on a cholesterol diet, like which actually is a diet from the animal kingdom, they actually develop the same diseases that we have with heart issues. And that is interesting. When you put a herbivore on a meat diet, a carnivorous
like what we're
diet,
eating,
omnivorous diet, they actually develop the same diseases that we have.
That's interesting.
That should be a proof that what happens when you put an herbivore to omnivorous diet. You get these diseases, and that's because we are herbivores actually.
So it's kind of like this study of, okay, we see our case, and then we see it repeated in another species, but it's the same result. So then we know.
That's also an argument, I would say, for the plant.
And isn't, just to connect that also with really to lifestyle, is that the cardiovascular disease, aren't they the top cause for death? Right?
Now they are. 100 years ago, they were rare. Like they were even interesting probably to look at as a medical student. But now they're so common. Happens every day in the emergency room, I remember. And
so this is really good news for Christians, for actually everyone, right? But especially for us, as we're talking here to primarily Christians. This is a very simple way in which we can live in the biblical way. Right? We were made for this, and it benefits our health. It reduces chances for the most common sicknesses that most people nowadays die of.
And I would say, isn't it fascinating that Moses, writing this 1400 years before Christ, like when they had almost no idea about health, just happened to write down like the ideal diet that we should eat today, like, and mentioning it there. I think that's quite interesting comparing to what the modern sciences, the Egyptians and the Assyrians knew about health during that age. That should tell us a little bit of the credibility of the Bible as well.
And I'm just I'm visualizing, now that you're kind of referring again to the Garden of Eden. And so when you see all the trees, you know, with the fruits on and maybe bushes with berries, I don't know all the things that they had, but you just see it and it's so colorful. And you know, you also, when you have a bowl with fruits or all these things, it looks so fresh, so appealing and attractive, versus if you have like this meat and that just, that doesn't compare. That doesn't look tasty by just, I would say, objective, you know, value. But we've, as humanity, have gotten so adjusted to it now in these last 100 years that we don't even separate those anymore.
And I want to also like encourage people to know that the taste really can change. It does, for sure. It does. Both when it comes to food, but also we see our habits also, like when we live off sin, that in the end we are not attracted to what we used to be. And it's the same with food as well. Like eventually you learn to enjoy simple, nutritious food. You do.
So there can still be a transition period.
Yeah, exactly. And that might be the difficult part. And people think like, oh, I have to like, but even then, if you find good, healthy, tasty recipes, it's not that difficult to start eating more plant-based and eventually.
Would you recommend, within mind then this transition period and people need to adjust, would you recommend to take it, for example, eat half of the days with meat, half not, or just immediately, you know, this cold change and just switch?
I know peoples and families, they are different. I can't say that I've looked into it, what is the most sustainable thing. I prefer to why not just go full in for it? I'm more that, and see what happens. And you do your best, and then even if you fall sometimes, you keep on doing it. It's much easier. Like somehow I never like these like transition periods. Maybe for some it will work better, but somehow I prefer to just go full for it and do your best and then forget the rest. And then if you don't succeed, sometimes you redo it and put the standard high.